Vallabh, if I may request you to share your thoughts on purpose and how to draw a line, because the compulsion for today's entrepreneur, if you're in the listed space, it is quarterly numbers. If you're backed by a private investor, it is compulsion to meet targets. So purpose again, sir, has to be defined with a aim on profitability and sustainability.
So, this question of more being good is I think, the real riddle. And so, most people either have a dream or an idea which they want to try out, and then they get resources, and the resources have terms, and therefore your dream is now got kind of inoculated, kind of perverted to some extent by these additional terms that come. And then as you become larger, more and more terms, public markets and regulation and so on and so forth. So the primary drive of an individual to create something is already overtaken or is mitigated, is kind of changed, amended by various constituencies that come on. And so yesterday I was discussing with Atul Bhai that actually speaking, how different forces are necessary in a society for the society to remain balanced. But whenever one force becomes too powerful, it kind of reduces the ability of all the other forces to function. Say, for example, the human rights. Now we are talking about expression or the freedom of every individual, and I believe that is the most important thing. But who looks after those freedoms? Is it a teacher or someone like a teacher? Or is it a finance person? Is it a political person? Is it a scientific person? And I have seen over the last 200-300 years that it is the money man. So in America, you talk about this deep state in America, which is the defense and the pharma industry, who are hidden behind so many of the political and diplomatic stances of the country. And their bottom line is money. Now, this is not visible. So if the politics and the science, like, COVID, we had so many stories coming out that vaccines needed to be pushed. And so we do not know what is right really, but there are so many controversies about it. That's why the temperate world economies, which are they happen to be more prosperous today, they don't have enough answers for diseases that are in the tropics. And therefore, millions of people continue to die, but greater billions will go into research in something which affects only, say, 100,000 people in a rich society. And therefore, this whole purpose gets directly, indirectly, but powerfully and inevitably by this collective force of money. And the money itself is not being, it has become purposeless because more has become better. And therefore, I think in a way, today's world, I see more hope. The children at a younger age are asserting their dreams. They are putting college, they're putting businesses, even if it's a small minority. This can become a force, a counter force to this lack of purpose, which is actually there's no purpose except being more and domination. And therefore, the number one power hates anyone coming too close. And we are seeing it all the time because they know no better. They do not think that, being number three and lasting a long time is a great strategy. And we have a company in the world which has, consistently done that, which is Nestle. And, enough has been written about it. And if people have not read it, may be useful. That instead of wanting to become Unilever or someone else, they say, all right, let them be number one. But we are very happy number two or number three. And so they've got sustainability, concept. They've absorbed it much better. I, for one, we dominated the capital markets, but my internal mantra was always, let us be amongst the top 2-3. And why is that necessary? It's necessary so that, you are conscious of what are the new developments, what your customers may be expected, what consumers are expected, what regulators may be expecting of you. So that makes you a better organism, better entity. And you don't have to be number one. And therefore, lot of the transgressions that come from anyhow number one anyhow dominate, those go away. So I think I have seen at least a few companies in my career who understand this purpose, that, oh, we started something, now we have an opportunity to, work with so many others and, run uh, their households. And if these households can multiply while we service our customers, how nice it is. This is a longish answer, but I would like to extend. Warren Buffett sir, gave an interview to Mr. Charlie Rose sometime back. And he said, what gives him happiness? He says that if I could make the same money by myself, it wouldn't give me that much happiness as it does when I'm able to do it with so many more people whose trust I enjoy, who enjoy my trust. My life is a lot more purposeful because instead of just making that money by myself, I'm doing it in a more purposeful manner. It is a lot more satisfying. That human contact, that community sense, he talks about it. And obviously, he is one person, who has gone the farthest in the West, or one of the few people who's gone the farthest in understanding this purpose.
Yeah, I mean, Nikunj, I'd like to add to that by just reminding the world that 400 billion animals a year are killed for food. And India is one of the oldest vegetarian nations of the world, And we could, as fund managers, as investors, we could take a decision during the G20 to say, okay, even if some animals need to be killed for food, let's create some kind of limit. Let's understand the damage that this is causing. And let's, in thinking about and finance leaders are parents, they are grandparents. Let's remind them of that connection and then enable them. I'm about to start a whole series of dialogues with finance leaders in London, which is one of the hearts of global finance capital, especially around these themes, So it's not about any new laws or regulations. Let's meet as a group of people with influence and power, and let's think about our grandchildren and their futures, and let's see how we can use our knowledge, our position of influence to channel the funds to redirect the investments in these areas. And I'm hoping that leaders from India would also come into those dialogues sometimes and help these people, because actually there are people like that, and people of faith, people of conscience, people who belong to communities and who would like to make a difference.
I mean, the beginning has to start somewhere, so I hope that this time there's a new beginning. I'll wrap it up with one final question, Professor. And this is more like a relative, comparative question. In your book, you've mentioned and you've compared the Western culture versus the Indian culture. How, to your mind, or what to your mind is the biggest difference between the Western business culture versus the Indian business culture? Because that is the crux which we perhaps want to bring out.
If you look at the history of empire, of the British Empire, or the history of the American Empire, it is built on conquest, it is built on subjugation. It's not just an attack on the environment, but it's also an attack on people, and especially native cultures. We know that. I don't need to remind Indians about the British Empire, but the same happened to the Native Americans. And all the Native Americans said is, please look after our land, But they were ignored, or the Aborigines in Australia. So really speaking, we need to come back to those roots. And this is where, India is one of the few countries in the world which, in spite of wars, in spite of attacks from the outside, it has somehow managed to retain the traditional values, culture, the faiths and the beliefs, And, we want a diverse world. We are not saying that there is only one culture or religion which has the right answers to sustain, not at all. But at the moment, in the language of economics and finance, there is no diversity. Even culture has been eliminated. Forget about rainforests, So we really need to change those equations. We need to start with a reforming of our understanding. And especially leaders who say, I'll just give you a simple example. ESG funds, all the European ESG funds are based in Luxembourg.
Yes.
Yeah. What does that tell you? That none of them want to pay taxes. How can you build a sustainable society without paying taxes, right? So it's things, the hypocrisy is so obvious and so real that, things have to change, and if not, maybe let the human species disappear, because the human species has had the worst record. There is only one species in the whole world which has done irreversible damage to the planet. Let it disappear.
Well, Professor, it's been a very engaging conversation. You've given us a lot of food for thought. I've really enjoyed the conversation. I'm sure our viewers would also do. And Mr. Bhansali, it's always a pleasure to have you on ET Now. Thank you for bringing out the importance of purpose and the way you've really defined it, that the definition of more. So thank you very much once again, Professor and Mr. Bhansali, and good luck with the book.
Thank you for hosting this. I would highly recommend that people look at this book. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. The viewers of ET Now need no introduction whatsoever to the world of finance. But the terms which are dominated or which have dominated the world of finance are profits, shareholder maximization, market share, and market cap. But is that the motive of finance? So what about sustainability? What about culture? In India, it's all about dharma and karma. And that is the point which we perhaps want to bring out in today's interaction of this very special ET interview. And it gives me great pleasure to bring on board Professor Atul Shah, Professor and someone who is also a practitioner. He's been doing public service and research in the space of inclusive sustainability in finance, and he spent 40 years in understanding the importance of that. Vallabh Bhansali also joins us. It's an extraordinary pleasure and a rare pleasure to have him as part of this conversation. Professor, so nice to connect with you. I have your new book in my hand. I'm going to share it with the viewers. I have scanned through it, and it's just been such a pleasure understanding the whole cause and the purpose which you are really championing. Tell us more about your work. 40 years of extraordinary research. What has been your key observation and finding?
Thank you so much, Nikunj. I am fortunate to have been born in the Jain diaspora in East Africa, and that geography is quite important. I was born at a time when Kenya just got independence. We've just built the first ever Jain temple in East Africa, and it was in between the East and the West. And now I live in the United Kingdom. So I'm roots from India, having experience of growing up in Africa, and now living in the United Kingdom. But the common thread, and which is common with Mr. Bhansali also, is one of the oldest living cultures of the world. And when I studied finance, there was no mention of this culture. It was not even relevant, even up to the PhD level. So I've done everything at the London School of Economics, bachelor's, master's, PhD. I'm a chartered accountant, no mention anywhere. And now we have this existential crisis. Of course, I was having an existential crisis throughout my academic career. So where is my culture? But I'm proud of my culture. How come I don't see it anywhere? And then the evidence of Jain performance in finance, like Mr. Bhansali or Mr. Nemish Shah or so many others, is all over our history books, right? So there is clearly a track record of sustainable performance, of lived experience, and of patience and humility, right? The qualities that the world is absolutely crying out for today in terms of finance leadership. And we've got it. We've got it in our DNA. We live by it even today in this age of materialism. And through living by it, I was with Mr. Bhansali at his boardroom just a couple of days ago, and there's this huge painting of Mahavira, Buddha, and quotes from these ancient wisdom right at the centerpiece of that boardroom. How many finance leaders can say that they put their values, their character, their tradition, their beliefs up front in front of other leaders and other board members when they meet, right? The context is so clear. And I'm really excited to work with Flame University as a visiting professor and to help India. This is such a fantastic opportunity. India is going to be the head of the G20. The G20 and the entire world is struggling with sustainability, with the challenge of climate change, and absolutely appreciates the power and responsibility of finance, but then how to channel it towards that harmonious planet, towards living in harmony with animals and nature. And this is where not only do we have a solution, but we have leaders hiding in plain sight.
Mr. Bhansali, while boardrooms are dominated by terms like market share gain, profit maximization, scalability, and market capitalization, what Professor Shah is bringing out is the uniqueness what India has to offer. We have the presidency of G20, and do you think this perhaps is the biggest platform for us to showcase the importance of Indian culture, purpose, and the tradition, and how they can be connected?
So, well, I don't have good understanding of G20 as to what its priorities are, and therefore, what opportunities lie within those priorities. But having said that, I think the whole positioning that India has taken, that world is one family, and Mr. Modi's, and I read a recent interview in New York Times where Jaishankar has talked a lot about this. So it would be wonderful that if we could position our Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, I think that one expression covers sustainability better than I think any other expression. Because it's this family that we understand. Sustainability is a synthetic treatment, an expression. To that extent, this whole Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam or Atithi Devo Bhava, that when the unknown comes, you welcome it and you respect it like a deity. So I think India's time has come, and I have spoken on previous occasions on your channel about it. And so one way is to look at it in a very existential manner that, we have everyone has a chance. It is India's chance after many hundreds of years is one way to look at it. And the second is that all ancient cultures get tested from time to time. We got tested for hundreds of years, and we have passed the test, and therefore again it's our chance, which is the nature of things, that it is cyclical. Therefore, I do hope that G20 or no G20, G20 is here only for a few years or 1 or 2 years at the most. But irrespective, I would say it is India's responsibility rather than opportunity, I would say, that having been the beneficiary of this amazing culture, contribution of so many rishis and sages and so on, that we develop a modern language, we develop compassion. It's very important not to finger point that, oh, you did this and you don't have this, that, etc. But how do we get this message across in a very compassionate manner? I think, I work a lot in that direction, and I would think that that is the real responsibility, much more than opportunity. And opportunity, again, Nikunj, if you will, is an expression of the kinds that you just mentioned, market share, etc., etc. And so some of these has given us our priority that, oh, this must be taken, opportunity must be taken. Opportunities are not always to be taken. There are many opportunities. We need to discretion much more than opportunity. And that's what the painting that Dr. Shah talked about. It has Warren Buffett and Mangalstam at the other end. One end is Buddha. And how they mentioned core competence to the humility of knowing what your core competence is, the humility and, that gives you patience, etc., etc. And Dr. Shah, through his commitment, done an extraordinary work of giving expression to the crying need and the wisdom available to us, and how do we match the two. So I'm extremely excited about his work, and I'm very happy to see you host him today.
Mr. Bhansali, you've incubated a lot of businesses. You've been part of a lot of advisory boards. But if you really have to connect the dots here and overarch it with the philosophy of tradition, culture, and purpose, what we're discussing, what do you think is the missing link, at least with Indian entrepreneurs?
So I wouldn't want to generalize all of them as such, but sometimes this thinking that more is better. Is more always better? Growth, when it loses its direction, it becomes cancerous. I think that is that Lakshman Rekha that we need to understand better. Primarily, I would say that the Indian businesses, there aren't many businesses who have taken the path of sustainable long-term growth. Mangar Saab says something very nice. He said, if there is going to be a test once every few decades, what matters is passing that test and not in between. So longevity being the greater test of success and excellence, once that is adopted, then you have growth as a tool to last that long, rather than growth for the sake of it. I think that is the mantra, I would say, that, make it lasting. And then to make it lasting, then words like meritocracy, justice, inclusiveness, all of them become more important. And that's how the West has come to the word sustainable, but I think it's a lot more complex. So maybe we need simpler explanation for the theme underlying. But, well, if there is a lingua franca, we work with it. And therefore, substituting longevity for size, I would say, has to be more popular.
Professor, in your deep work, 40 years of experience, I'm sure you've looked at case studies. There are some case studies which are also mentioned in your book. Now, Vallabh is flagging off a very important thing, which is the longevity. Most important. To put it simply, that you need to survive. What has been your experience as to companies which are the companies or which are the instances where organizations and entrepreneurs have championed longevity?
Thank you. One of the people I interviewed for this research is Dr. Abhay Firodia, whose father, Navalmal Firodia, invented the auto rickshaw. Now, it's a very interesting story in the sense he was a lawyer by profession. He had his own law practice, but he was also a freedom fighter. He went to jail several times during the independence struggle. And when India got independence, he decided to do something to build the new India, to do something serious, something practical, something relevant. And his idea was to create an affordable method of public transport. I mean, just imagine the vision, right? Now, through that, he invented the auto rickshaw. He went into business, so gave up the profession, went into business. And when you now look at the auto rickshaw, it as an ecosystem, right? How many hundreds of thousands, if not millions of family businesses are built on this one auto rickshaw? And I've spoken to all the auto rickshaws drivers in this visit, and they are all contented, they are happy, they are meeting their family obligations. Huge multinational corporation like RB or Unilever. I mean, how do you now suddenly think of purpose when you've already, got a range of products and services, or Amazon, where you, and then, so it almost becomes another mantra that you kind of want to create so that you want to show you're doing sustainability. But we really need to get back to the grassroots of purpose. And I think what Vallabh said earlier, when I look at, I spoke to the person who, did my shoe shine for 20 rupees this morning. He had a very clear sense of purpose. He had no massive ambitions in life apart from renewing the shoe so that it becomes new again, which is actually recycling the shoe. And it is the lowest of the low professions, but the amount of pride I saw in his eyes when he did his job and the fulfillment. I even asked him, do you earn enough to feed? Oh, yes, sir. To feed your family? Oh, yes, we have enough. So this sense of contentment, this the world needs to understand. The world at the moment, especially in the West, has been programmed to be constantly discontented, to be constantly striving, progressing, growing. For what?
Isn't that hunger also? Isn't that hunger which is required to grow? Aspiration and hunger.
Hunger is required, but the hunger needs to go alongside understanding. And the area that I focus on in this book is let us collectively understand the nature and limits of money. Yeah? Because let us make money a servant, not a master. Money should never be allowed to be a master as it has become today. I just finished a study, a big research study on the childcare industry in Britain, where private equity has come in like a big giant parasite. And it's all driven by finance, profits, value creation. The child has been completely removed from the equation. How can we build a sustainable society if we don't think about the future development of the child?